Now I'm going to demonstrate morning chores. So the water bucket lives behind the door to the house, and I take it and I fill it at the sink. I use cold water, fill it to about a half an inch below the lid, put the lid on after it's full, and head to the barn. So here we are at the barn. Slide open the doors, and if you need to turn on the light, slide open the other doors. Check and make sure that the fencer has 2 lights blinking. That's plugged in. This is straw. It's the gold. It will be on this side. This is hay. It's green. It will be on this side. In the morning, you bed down with straw first, and then later feed dry hay in the feeders. So I'll have to open this bale of straw, and I have a razor blade up here to open the twine. It's a half a bale of bedding, a half a bale of straw per morning to bed them down. Hi kiddos, what are you guys doing? I always call a greeting, let them know that I'm coming. Unlatch the door, swing it closed behind you. I do the does first, so I grab their log, open up their doors. Place all of the bedding in here, and then spread it around. I like to spread it as evenly as possible for 2 reasons. The first is the bedding acts as a barrier between the fecal matter from the day before, and it can't act as a barrier very well if there's big holes where it's not blocking. And the other is I get the most coverage with the least amount of straw if I take the time to spread it out. And I do buy the straw, so I want to keep my expenses down. You'll see that they don't always move out of the way. You can just gently move them with your foot or rebed in that little hole once they've moved down. They're pretty good at picking through the straw and finding all of the leftover grain and weeds and things that are packaged in here. This is organic straw, so I don't mind that they're picking through it and eating all of the seeds and other things that they find in here. So I do this for all of the surface area that's exposed. Make sure you don't bury this. This is their mineral feeder. Make sure it remains accessible. Once you are done bedding the does, you empty out their hay feeders from the baleage that was left over from last night. So here, this is a little bit too little. I'm looking at what's left over from what they ate. This little bit tells me that I didn't quite feed them enough, and so I might have to consider feeding them more. You're always looking at the feedback from the day before or from the feeding before to determine if you are feeding them enough. Also a note, this is leftover baleage, like I said, from last night. Just a note about the baleage, it should smell sweet and yeasty, slightly yeasty, like a beer that hasn't quite brewed all the way. If when you're taking it out of these hay feeders, the day after you find a big clump, it's usually because there was a part that was molding and the rabbits didn't want to eat it. You don't want to toss that on the ground here. You want to toss that outside the yurt. Also, when you're feeding the baleage, if there's any part that smells like ammonia or fish or even an earthy dirt smell, that's usually an indication that it's not good and you shouldn't feed it to the rabbits. So when you're feeding the baleage, make sure it smells sweet and yeasty. It has a very particular smell. So now that you've cleaned out the hay feeders in preparation for the dry hay, you're going to go to the barn and grab the dry hay. So again, there's a razor blade up here. The dry hay is over here. It's green. You can open it up with the razor blade. You're going to feed almost a whole bale. Sometimes it is a whole bale, depending on how the dry hay, how compact it is. So I usually just start with a big handful like this, and you can always come back for more if you need to. So I place the dry hay on one of the feeders. Drop, kiddos. And then it's about 3 flakes per feeder. This is the flake. Sometimes it flakes easy, sometimes it doesn't. You just kind of have to do your best. This is a little bit too thin for a flake. You want it to be a little bit bigger than that. So that's about 3 flakes. And they go into the feeder with a short end down, like that. And so by the rabbits' behavior, all of them crowding around to eat, tells me that my hunch, I didn't quite feed them enough last night, is true. And so I'll just take that into consideration for my next couple of feedings. This is called a creep feeder over here. It's for the babies so that they can creep through these wires and get to the food, and the mamas can't. And I put 1 flake of dry hay into the creep feeder every morning, and that way the babies always have access to food. Hi, kiddo. And it's a pretty thin flake. A thick flake won't really fit in there too well, so. And it's always dry hay that goes into the creep feeder, just once a day in the morning. I don't want it to run over the bowl because then it slips between the bowl and the insulation and it causes the bowl to rust. So I try not to overfill it and have it pour over. Also, then it just goes down into the bedding and makes the bedding rot faster. So now that's morning chores are done for the does. They have hay, they have water. I bedded them down. Now I can shut them in before I move on to the bucks. So these are the bucks, and this is the bedding that I tossed over earlier. I'm going to go ahead and spread it out. They tend to defecate a lot around their water bowl, so I lay it on pretty thick right there. Watch out, Buckle. And then elsewhere it's just a little bit more of a thin, evenly spread film. And these hay feeders, both for the buck and for the does, I move them about twice a week, so they may not be in this configuration when you come back out, but that's alright. Just feed them, or put hay in the feeders in whatever configuration they're in. And then again, clean up the baleage from the night before. And again, I toss this outside because it's pretty crowded in the yurt for the bucks. So I just throw it outside for them. And you'll go to the barn to get more dry hay. So I'll probably end up feeding out the rest of this bale. You can pull the twine. It goes into this box. So now we are back with our hay, and you can place it in the feeder for the bucks. Same way that you place it in the feeder for the does. Short end down. About 3 flakes per feeder. This is flaking into small flakes, but it's about the same quantity. And the last thing, just like with the does, is to fill their water bowl. I like to, ideally this would happen every morning, where you take the de-icer out, remove the water bowl, dump it outside, clean it out a little bit, and replace it with fresh water. I don't always get to do that in the mornings, so it's, you know, maybe every other morning or every third morning that I actually get to do that. So it's ideal, but if you don't get to it, that's fine. For the bucks, they usually have some extra bedding over here from their hole. They have this hole that they keep open that goes outside, and there's often extra bedding over there that you can grab and shove under here to keep the water bowl from sinking down into the bedding and becoming inaccessible. So once you clean it out, lift it up, take the water bucket, and with the remaining water, fill their bowl. So that concludes the morning chores. All of the hay feeders are full of dry hay for the bucks and for the does. They are all bedded down, and they have fresh water. So you can close them in, exit the yurt, and latch the door behind you.